Yes, Kenya. Tamu sana, tamu sana, tamu sana, yes. Let's have a look at a very interesting story. A story that has been making headlines today. The story is going to form the basis of our analysis and discussion right now. Dozens of armed police officers Wednesday laid roadblocks on roads leading to State House in Nairobi ahead of a planned protest by a section of Kenyans over the cost of living. The protesters are also angered by various reforms initiated by President William Ruto. Police were deployed with spikes at various points on major roads, including State House Road, State House Avenue, Processional Way, and Dennis Street, where they briefly stopped and questioned motorists. As early as 6 a.m., the teams had arrived and at times turned away motorcyclists. The officers said they were under instructions not to allow the motorcyclists as they could be used to ferry crowds to State House for the protests. This came even amid confusion on if the planned mass action by Azimio la Umoja leaders would continue. The 14-day ultimatum issued by the leaders ends Wednesday, and there have been meetings to plan the mass action, officials said. That's a story that has been making headlines today. From the story, it's clear that all roads leading to State House have been blocked. So William Ruto and his team are not taking Raila's warning or threats lightly. Ruto is prepared to deal with Raila Odinga and his team. That's exactly what I'm making from this story. He is ready to face Raila and his team. In this video, I want us to dig deep into this story for Kenyans to understand the possible endgame or other possible endgames of all these political maneuvers by William Ruto and by the Azimio wing of the political divide. Before we do that, let's listen, or rather let's have a look at briefly to what happened in Sri Lanka. Have a look at this.
That's it! That's Sri Lanka! Come on, Sri Lanka!
That was Sri Lankan revolution, a revolution that forced the then president Gotabaya Rajapaksa out of power. The people decided to invade the presidential palace, forcing the president to flee the country. So, what led Sri Lanka to that? That was caused by economic mismanagement by the government, resulting in the 2019 present Sri Lankan economic crisis, shortages of fuel and essential items and power cuts, high inflation, and the rapid rise in the cost of living, authoritarianism, corruption, and nepotism of the Rajapaksa family. Those are the causes that eventually resulted in that. If you compare, rather you see what is happening in Kenya, the causes are almost similar. Kenyans are complaining of the high cost of living, we are witnessing corruption in this government, in that individuals being seen as corrupt are being given government jobs, and their cases are being dropped for them to serve in government. We are seeing nepotism and tribalism. A government only appointing two communities, the Kalejins and the Mountain. All these things are similar to what happened in Sri Lanka. And eventually in Sri Lanka, President Gotabaya, a very strong president, was forced out of power and he had to flee the country. And before being forced out of power, the government of Gotabaya actually used a lot of force to thwart the protests. In the photos, you are seeing that the police were very brutal. They were using a lot of force on protesters, and even the government was using goons to intimidate those who are protesting. So besides the government using the army and the police, the government of Gotabaya was also sponsoring goons to intimidate protesters. And that's something that has actually been captured here. Series of coordinated attacks on protesters by pro-Rajapaksa mobs, triggering multiple retaliatory attacks by protesters on the property of Rajapaksa, loyalists, and other parliament members. So you are seeing the government was using goons on the protesters. The government reacted to the protest with authoritarian methods, such as declaring a state of emergency, allowing the military to arrest civilians, imposing curfews, and restricting access to social media. The government violated the law and the Sri Lankan constitution by attempting to suppress the protests. The Sri Lankan diaspora also began demonstrations against the suppression of basic human rights in the country. In April, the government's ban on social media was perceived to have backfired, causing hashtags such as Go Home Gota and Go Tago to become trending on Twitter. Internationally, the government's ban was lifted later that day. You are seeing that the government was using all tactics to frustrate the protests to an extreme length of even using goons. In Kenya, already we are seeing some people who are not even government officials declaring that they're going to close Jacaranda. Yes, some are think the likes of Boston, that they are going to close Jacaranda. These are not government officials. They have got completely no portfolio in William Ruto's government. But you are seeing clearly they are trying to thwart or to intimidate those critical of William Ruto's government. All these things have been done somewhere else. These are not things, or rather there is nothing happening in Kenya that has never been done or happened in other countries. In fact, in Sri Lanka, it was even more brutal. The government had even to bring in the army. The army and the police were all on the streets, beating the protesters. So from what I'm seeing here, Azimio Brigade and the opposition should be ready to deal with all that. It's almost very certain and very clear Ruto's government might use similar tricks. They might use the army The police, they might even sponsor goons on the protesters. Those are things the opposition should and must be ready to deal with. Just some few days ago, we saw Omosh being arrested and being assaulted in a police cell. All these are things the opposition should and must prepare to deal with. So let's have a look at the strategies that were used in Sri Lanka, the methods, the one that were used by the protesters. There were political demonstrations, internet activisms, rioting, strike action, protests. Those were the methods that were used very successfully in Sri Lanka. As I conclude, it's almost very certain and very clear that the causes of Tunisian revolution are almost similar to what Kenyans are going through. In fact, we are seeing William Ruto's government attempting to disregard the constitution, because according to our constitution, the people have a right to demonstrate, to protest, to picket. The people have a right of association. We are seeing William Ruto's government trying to deny Kenyans those basic rights. We are seeing them now blocking State House Road. We are seeing them, they are now chasing people, or rather blocking Kenyans from congregating at Jacaranda. And from the look of things, Ruto might even unleash the army. All these are things that are similar to what led to Sri Lanka revolution. Let's meet in our next analysis. But the mere fact that all roads leading to State House are being blocked confirms William Ruto is panicking and feeling the weight of Raila Odinga. Let's meet in our next analysis. But in case you want to support our forum, I've pinned my number on the comment section. Contact me through the number, or feel free to channel your support to the number. Let's meet in our next analysis.